Through hustle and hard work, I've got to here anyway, but I could have maybe done it a lot more efficiently.
Today, I am super excited to be here with JP Palombo. He's the founder of PureStay and the host network. And it's just been amazing to see the growth of his organization, now managing more than 65 properties. There's properties in there that he does rent to rent with, arbitrage as we know it here. There's properties in there that he owns. He's ventured into the boutique hotel investment space. You've been an entrepreneur for many years. If you were to start all over again in this industry, what, if anything, would you have done differently?
Nobody explains your day-to-day will look like this. Your stress level will look like this. Your pain points will look like this. Because of course no one really wants to talk about that stuff.
You've mentioned that there's always going to be an element of chaos in building a business, and there's no joy, there's no happiness in being the most organized business. What were the tools at your disposal to allow you to not go crazy?
I don't know if I did not go crazy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hospitality Edge podcast, where we bring together what we think are two sides of the same coin, real estate and hospitality, and where we aim to bring together entrepreneurs, investors, founders, leaders, operators in the vacation rental, short-term rental, and hospitality industry so they can tell us about their stories, the lessons they have learned along the way, as well as maybe some of the mistakes they might have made along the way so we don't have to make those same mistakes ourselves. Today, I am super excited to be here with JP Palombo. He's the founder of PureStay and the host network. I had the opportunity to meet JP a couple of years ago in the UK at the Short Stay Summit conference. And since then, it's just been amazing to see the growth of his organization, now managing more than 65 properties. There's properties in there that he does rent to rent with, arbitrage as we know it here. There's properties in there that he owns. He's ventured into the boutique hotel investment space. We're going to talk about that as well. He's developing a very exciting project as well on the community building and network building side of things with hosts, always driven by education and contribution. He's been a coach, coaching other entrepreneurs, helping other entrepreneurs navigate the challenges that come with being an entrepreneur, as well as just someone that every single time I speak with, I learn something from and enjoy a fun conversation. So yeah, super excited to have you on, JP. Thank you for taking the time. Let's go straight into, if you don't mind, we'll get into your story and everything else, but let's go straight into, from everything you've done in your life. You've been an entrepreneur for many years. You've started many different projects, companies, etc. If you were to start all over again in this industry, in this short-term rental industry, knowing what you know today, what, if anything, would you have done differently?
Yes, good to speak to you as well, Step. Oh my God, great question, tough question. What do you hear people say? If I was to start again, I would do X, and you think that's so far away. And now I feel like I'm in that position, right? I genuinely think you've got to know where your exit is. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's say I'm starting this whole hospitality, real estate, property journey. We call it property over here in the UK. So when I say property, I mean real estate. Let's say I'm starting again. I would ask myself, or I'd say to myself, where do you want to be in 5 years? And I don't mean a cash position. I don't mean that. I mean, do you want to sell? Or do you want to be the CEO of a growing business? Or do you want to be an owner, a founder, but not run the company? And I'd be having conversations around that, because I got to be honest, when you start, nobody really talks to you about the stuff. Nobody explains, okay, your day-to-day will look like this. Your stress level will look like this. Your pain points will look like this. Because of course, no one really wants to talk about that stuff. Nobody necessarily knows what you're getting into. If you're surrounding yourself by beginners, no one knows. It's all like, oh yeah, I'm hustling this, I'm hustling this. It's all about the hustle, which is cool. It's really good. That's what gets, I use this analogy of an aeroplane going down the runway. For the first three years of my business, I felt like we were just gathering speed. And then there was a moment, I don't know what that moment was, but I could just feel it. The plane took off. And we're still in that rising, we're not far. I can still see the runway, but we're not on the ground anymore. We've taken off. I think if there was one thing, it would be, what do I want my day-to-day to look like? What do I want from my business? Do I want to set, like I said, I want to set it for a ton of money or some money or a little money? Do I want to have staff build a team? Do I want to franchise and get other owners within my brand? I mean, there's probably lots of answers to that question, but I keep coming back to that one because I'm now figuring out a position that I'm in. And I'm like, oh, this is cool. But I didn't know I was going to be here. I didn't know that it looked like at this stage, 6 years in to this group of companies. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
yeah. So let's say you had done that exercise of asking yourself those questions early on, right? You had sort of had that introspection. You knew where you wanted to end up. What would that have changed in terms of your behavior? What would you have done differently, perhaps, over the last 6 years because of the fact that you were more strategic about where you wanted to end up?
Great question. So a bit of background then. And I think this is where the muddle came in for me, where I've now got clarity, where I was a bit muddled at the beginning. I was doing both purchase and rent to rent of properties for the use of short stays. So Airbnb, Booking.com, all of that stuff. Back to 2018. And I had in my head, I want PureStay to be this really high quality brand. And I want to grow this brand. But I wasn't clear on what is the brand. Is it management of units or is it ownership of units? And therefore it's not actually a brand. It's just a property more, as you said in the hospitality edge, it's that perfect blend of both sides of the coin, right? In other words, which side of the coin am I trying to build? I honestly thought it was one side and they were both on the same side. I didn't realize it's actually two different sides. I know that now, of course, but back then I didn't know. So how would I make things change? I probably would have had two clear strategies. Build a portfolio of properties that I either own or I lease. And ultimately you want to own these buildings eventually. Even if you lease 100, you then want to start plowing some profits into some ownership because your leases are going to run out. We all know this who do rent to rent or you guys call it arbitrage, right?
Yeah.
Which sounds funny me in saying that, but rent to rent, we call it, where if you don't know, you rent a property owned by someone else, usually for a term of 5 years, much like a corporate hotel would. They actually don't own the building, they rent the building, and then you operate your business within it. That's a rent to rent model in its simplest form. So I think, Seb, if I had the clarity that I've got now, I would have gone all in on growing PureStay management as a management of short stay properties. It would have drastically changed how I structured the business, drastically changed what I focused on. Instead of going for more rent to rent, I'm actually building my online presence. I'm building my, let's say, Google. I'm building my SEO, and I'm really targeting owners of these properties so that I can manage, we can manage, and we can offer what we wanted, which is that higher level. I could never find that level of service that I wanted. And that's what made me start PureStay, because I thought I'm a details person. I'm a very particular person. I say that on one hand, and on the other hand, I'm very like, you said it with Richard Branson's book, like, screw it, let's do it. Like, I've definitely got that in me as well. So it probably would have pushed me much more down a management route, extracted profits more strategically to then purchase assets as a bit of a side banking of profits, rather than me going hell for leather in building a property portfolio and then as a byproduct starting a management company.
The idea of trying to focus first on the acquisition led to maybe not growing the management side as much as you could have grown it, and you feel like if you had focused on growing the management company, the profits would have still allowed you to feed the acquisition machine, so you could have ended up doing both. But because you focus more on acquiring and rent to rent first, maybe you let the management growth on the side a little bit. Does that sound about right?
Exactly right. And the difference I would have had, and if you're just starting and you are listening to this, the difference is be clear on what it is you're doing. And I wasn't clear. Through hustle and hard work, I've got to here anyway. But I could have maybe done it a lot more efficiently. And this is this is massively where, we're going to talk about my sort of new project, which is the host network. And I don't want to bash on about that too much, but it's exactly what it's about. It's supporting hosts to get the clarity that I've now got to say, okay, we can look at your short-term rental business, your Airbnb listings, your optimization, all of that stuff. But more so, how do I set up a business? And more on top of that is, what business am I trying to set up? What am I trying to achieve? What kind of life do I want? Everybody says, £10,000 a month. I want a life of choices and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, that's all great. But what are you actually building? Are you headed to where you think you're headed? Or are you creating a really stressful job? Or are you creating...
And I want to ask you, because there's kind of like two extremes we can go here, right? We can go the extreme of like, just doing things like the hustle you're saying, where you maybe don't have a lot of clarity, but you try so many things, you throw so many things at the wall that something ends up sticking at some point, but you have no idea. And maybe you're doing work in double, you're not efficient, right? You maybe are spread too thin, right? But at the end of the day, you're making progress because you're just like compensating with volume, right? On the other extreme, you might like go and spend, hours, weeks, months planning, being strategic, having all this detailed map and roadmap of how you're going to get there. And then you go into the reality and maybe realize that like your plan is not even, relevant. So how do you now kind of mix the two, right? The need to do things, to try things, to hustle, like you said, but while also being a little bit more strategic, so you're not just running around like a headless chicken.
Such a great conversation. I mean, I could literally enjoy talking about this for hours and hours and hours, and we're probably not going to do that. But how I don't know is the answer, because I think a lot of this is down to your personality type. So my personality type, like I've already said, I'm super detailed. My background is an architect and architecture, and loving that trade of detail, but also loving in architecture, you've got to have a real detail eye, but you've got to have a math, what's the word?
Like a macro view of things too.
Scale understanding and a micro scale understanding. So you've got to have real strong visualization. You've got to be able to see, okay, the whole landscape is going to change, but also what's that screw looking like in that detail. So it's a brilliant, brilliant conversation. It's very much, in my opinion, down to who you are as a person. There's a lot of people out there. I just said it to my team. We had a team call an hour before this call. So I feel like I've spoken a lot already. But I said, there's no joy in the most organized business on the planet. There's no joy in being the most organized business on the planet. Why did I say that? Well, a lot of my team members, they want to get organized. Spreadsheets, files, folders, all nicely on the Google Drive. And the reason I say there's no joy in being the most organized is because if you're moving forward and you're growing as a business and you're taking in sales and new customers and new properties, there's undoubtedly an element of chaos. And that is where we've got to find that balance. And I think the answer is the same for your question. You don't want to be there, you've got no business, you've got no sales, you've got no traction, but you've got a really structured plan. And I'm going to wait for the perfect day to implement this plan. And that day never comes. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Or you're the other kind, which was definitely more me, where you are hustling like mad and you are throwing things at the wall and they're sticking and they're falling off, and some stick more than others. And you like me in the early days, you're scraping wallpaper off the old properties that you've just bought, and you're painting, and you're then pricing, and you're trying to list, and you're doing everything. And that's more common. Everyone who's in business is more familiar with that role. There's a perfect blend somewhere in the middle, but it depends on your personal type. I think the best person is, it comes to mind, Seb, that I coach a young guy, he's 22 years of age. And he for me has got the perfect blend. He's a hustler, but he very quickly stops, takes stock and goes, there's a better way to do this. And maybe that's down to having people like myself, older, more experienced, around him, coaching him. But I think a lot of it's innate in his personality. And I just admire his personality to say, wow, I can coach you, but I can't give the answers as a coach. My job is to extract it from that person that I'm coaching, right? Mm-hmm. And He just gets it. He's got this perfect blend. It's just his personality. It's just who he is. Some other people got to hustle a lot more, and that's cool. It might just take you longer, but you might go further than someone who's super honest.
It
But not
depends on
necessarily.
your personality. No, it's a good point, right? It's not a one size fits all approach to life or to things, but you definitely need a mix of both. Because if you only have one side, I think that's where it can be challenging. Now, in your case, JP, let's say, right now you're starting a new project, right? So I'm curious to know, how do you approach the starting of a new business, new project today differently from, when you were starting, let's say, PureStay, 6 years ago? What are the elements that you think through now, planning versus execution, right? And how is that different to if I was asking this question to JP 6 years ago about how PureStay was getting started?
Yeah, and it's so different. So I'm not going to say this every question, but it's a great, great question. And if anyone is out there about to start, I think this is where I know I could add a lot of value, but people that have done it, they will add a lot of value to this at this stage. So talk to people that have got 6, 7 years behind them, even 4, 5 years behind them, whatever. Talk to those people if you're just starting, because what I would say is, I've just started a new strand of our business, PureStay Housekeeping. So it's the first time we brought housekeeping, let's say, in-house into PureStay management. But we wanted to set this up like a very much a new business, a standalone, on its own 2 feet business. It's a service-based business. It's very hands-on. It's very simple in my eyes, like a business. We change over Airbnb properties and we charge the client, and all we have to look after is your usual, staff and operations and some systems and some finances, and very simple, and sales and marketing, right? So with that, I actually went out to my network and I found someone who had the expertise in helping me set up this business. I outlined, this was done about 6 months ago, and I outlined exactly what I wanted, how I saw the vision, should I say, how I saw the end finish line, which is day one in the business, if you like. And then I left this person to it, and we touched base once a week. Probably, we had a debrief, and there was maybe more help that I could have given, because I'm kind of a, okay, let's set and forget kind of guy. But I let this person crack on and meet their targets, and they got paid as they hit their targets. And then as soon as the business was set up, they exited. And that person did a wonderful job. They recruited not only the staff, a head housekeeper, and cleaners. We found a unit. We found a place to store all of our goods. We did linen contracts. We went and visited linen, different size companies, on how we're going to handle linen. And then we looked at marketing and how we're going to get our first few clients. That business was set up with maybe 10 hours of my involvement. And now it's flowing, and it's cash flowing. And there's a full team in place. I did not do that in the beginning. I did not do that. There's a lot of hustle and a lot of chaos at the beginning, because you just simply do not know. But once you've done it several times, it's much easier. Let's look at the new project that I've got. I tend to do a project maybe every 6 to 12 months, a new business project of some form. The next one is the host network. We've already mentioned it. So it's a network, a paid for network of blend between, a family, i.e. a network, and education, support, but more so how to structure and run a business, that kind of support. So any hosts out there that want to be in the host network, that's what it is. How am I approaching it? Very similar. I brought in a team that are experts in personal brand, that are experts in putting an offer together and creating both a personal brand online, creating an offer, and then I've got the content of everything that's going to go in that offer. And we're all working like crazy for the next 6 months. And then we'll probably be in a position of, I can run this from now on. Thanks so much, guys. And they will exit. So I think the very simple ways, don't do it alone. Don't try be everything to the business, because you will just fall down, especially if you're doing another business already. And just ask for help. Yes, it'll cost you money, probably, unless you get a family member that's quite happy to work for free, but I don't recommend that. Find someone that knows what they're doing in that industry and pay them to help you, guide you, to keep you accountable, to give you deadlines, to say, right, we need this for this date. And then, you set out the vision.
Interesting. And on that note, with this approach, because you got to incentivize these people to come in, help you out, and then be willing to at some point also step away, right? Once they've built the machine, how do you think about doing this? Is it I'm gonna give them some a percentage of the revenue that they generate over the next 6 months? Is it like, do you use the new business they're starting as the way to fund, paying them, or do you have your other business kind of like subsidize the investment into, having these people help out? Do you see it as a personal expense of yours that because you're starting this new thing, this is just part of what it's going to cost? How do you think about doing this and incentivizing people? Because you can think of it as, okay, maybe you're giving away, equity or stock options, but then if you're building it to a certain point and then you're stepping away once the business machine is built, then it's not necessarily like the same setup of an early stage, startup employee. So I'm curious to know like how you structure this. If someone wanted to, replicate this idea of bringing in some experts up until a certain point, how do you build that incentives plan to those people?
Yeah, I got to be very clear, I suppose, because I'm not talking about finding a joint venture partner or a co-founder, because that's a great option as well. But it is a very different option. I don't necessarily look for a co-founder. I do have a JV partner in another business, and that's for a slightly different reason. There's a long-term project. We both bring different things. The chap's called Dom. Dom has skills that I don't have, and vice versa. And together we've got this goal that we want to go and achieve. However, these projects, you said it, like I use my existing businesses and we pay for the new ventures. Now, some might fall flat, not go anywhere, and be a waste in inverted commas of money. Okay, some will do that. That's a position we're in. We can afford to do that. But where there's a very strong business model, there's a very strong reason to do this, I will go and find an expert that's not a co-founder or a founder themselves, that's not necessarily wanting to be a co-founder in this business, but their services or their expertise, I'll pay for that on like a monthly basis. And you'll probably find it's a little bit more expensive than if you were to hire someone. If I was to hire someone in England, it might cost me £3,000 a month. Was that? It sort of equates to, maybe a £36,000, £30,000 to £35,000 salary. Cost me as the employer somewhere around £3,000 a month. But then, if I have to move them on, if they're not the ones I'm looking for, there's that whole complication. Whereas if I hire a contractor and I say, this is your project, it's a project based, I'm going to pay you a flat fee. I've got a lot more flexibility, right? And I pay for them out of my existing business. So I got to say, it is easier now financially than it was in the beginning, because again, watching this and you're at the beginning, you're probably going to go, I've got no money. The whole point is, I'm trying to get started. I can't just pay, on average £15,000 to get this person in to start this project. Whereas now I can't. And when I started 6-7 years ago, I had zero. I remember having some savings of about £6,000. And that was it. I just went all in. And when I say I had zero, I had no income guarantee. I had nothing coming in. So I really did bootstrap. But now I've got to the position, I think a lot of self-development got me to a position of saying, get out of your own way. JP, you are the bottleneck. Get out of the way. I say this all the time. Yes, I'm a visionary. I can see things very clearly. But I am not an implement of detail when it comes to, you need to do this to then allow that person to do that or whatever. So I know my weakness. If I've got 10 things on my list, I'll just be like, God, what do? I'll go and have a walk because it's just too much. But if you want me to solve problems, I can solve 10 problems and then delegate. So
yeah, no, and it comes with self-awareness, like you're saying, it is really just What are you good at? What are you not the best necessarily at? And it's like, yeah, you can take the approach of trying to, you know, become better at the things you're not naturally gifted at, but that's opportunity because you could be spending in the things you're naturally gifted at and just kind of like growing a lot faster. But to your point, for someone, I guess for someone that's starting out, you don't have that privilege, so that's why at first you do what you got to do. You have to do it yourself, and once you're in a position to have some cash flow and some liquidity, then it's like, okay, well, let's take a percentage of that and let's invest it into like new ventures, experimentation. Now, how do you distinguish, because I'm sure you must come up with many ideas, right? As someone that's always sort of on the lookout for what else. How do you differentiate sort of like an idea that's going to be a distraction and shouldn't be pursued because it's like Alex Hormozi talks about, the woman in the red dress, right? It's just something that's going to take you away from your core thing and is going to end up, spreading you too thin, versus an idea that is worth pursuing that, makes sense strategically for what you're trying to go after. So how do you distinguish the two?
I think the word that you mentioned, which is core thing, if it complements or aids or helps your core thing, it's worth exploring. If it completely distracts from your core thing, it's a bit of a red flag. It's a bit dangerous, right? So our core thing at the moment is PureStay management. We manage, like I said, Airbnb, Booking.com. We manage short stays around the UK. That's our core thing. There's so many moving parts in that core business. There's all of the usual business aspects. What do I mean by that? So you've got marketing, you've got finance, you've got operations, you've got sales, you've got, what have I missed? Anyway, yeah, you've got all the usual business things. And then you've got your donors, your clients, your people that give you the properties to look after. So that's a whole discussion in itself. And you kind of owe them a certain level of service. You owe them a certain amount of time. We're looking after their property. We owe them time. So if I was swanning around doing a project that took all of my time that was completely unrelated, I'd feel real torn probably, because I'm still in the position of being the CEO. If I brought in a CEO and I stepped back and then I went off to become, professional juggler, whatever, that's different. But at the minute, I'm still the CEO. So any venture that we've got, and how do I decide? It aids or helps the core business. For example, the housekeeping, PureStay housekeeping was created because I was so frustrated at, one, how much we had to pay, and two, for the poor standard that we were getting. And we're specifically at the moment in Bath in the UK, which is like Somerset. It's a beautiful city. It's a real historic city as well. People go there to holiday. They expect a certain level, especially if they're booking PureStay, they expect a certain level. And I just couldn't find it with other cleaners and housekeepers. So it made sense. I looked at the numbers and I thought, wow, if I invest, like I said earlier, about 15,000 to get this thing set up, it does two things. It lowers the cost and it improves the quality that I can deliver. It's a no-brainer. Like, you will get opportunities, just a no-brainer. However, if it's your first business, that's a very different conversation, isn't it? It's like, which one do you choose? And I've got a different coach of mine who's not as strategic as the other chap that I mentioned. He came to me with 7 business ideas and they were all completely different. And, I kind of felt for the guy because I thought, I've been here. I could do this and then tomorrow, but I've got a different idea. I could do this and I could do this and I could do this. You have to, I think a lot of people will say, go with what you love and go with, your passion. I don't know if I can swear on this, so I won't, but that's not good advice. That's really, really not good advice. Because, my passion is golf. I love golf. Many of us do. I am terrible at golf. I'm okay. If you've never played, you'd look at me and go, he's okay. No. Compared to what I should be for the amount of hours I put in, I'm terrible. It's my passion, but it's absolutely not something I can make money from. If it's your first business, I would say you need, Hormozy talks about a starving audience. You absolutely need a starving audience. You need an audience that's going to be receptive to whatever service or product you're going to create. But also, do you have to love it? You have to not hate it. And I'd say you have to have a level of passion for it. But is anyone really passionate about some businesses? Maybe not. Maybe not. I don't know. That's again, that's a whole big conversation, I would say. But with me, now that we've got a core business, same with the host network, it's bringing hosts together to both communicate about the market in the UK, much like around the world. There's all sorts of changing legislation. So having a network of specific hosts will really aid everything that we do and that they do. And also having a network and a crowd of people that I can help only strengthens my position in terms of if I'm teaching something on pricing or if I'm teaching something on listing optimization, I'm going to be refreshing my knowledge every day and just going, let me check that this property that's, it's kind of down here at 50% occupancy. What's going on? Let me deep dive it. So in other words, it's going to really strengthen your core position. That's what I would say.
Got it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, so looking for synergies that are going to make your core offer better, rather than just ideas that might be good ideas but are completely unrelated to your core offer, core business. That makes a lot of sense. Now, let's talk a little bit about sort of your evolution as well when it comes to how you balance, entrepreneurship with personal life. I guess let's start with, you've mentioned that there's always going to be an element of chaos, in building a business, and there's no joy, there's no happiness in being the most organized business. I couldn't agree more with that. I mean, I fully agree with you on that. But then this chaos, you got to be able to, embrace it. You got to be able to accept it. You got to be able to live with it. You got to be able to sleep at night, hopefully. So how do you, like at the very early beginnings of your process, what were the tools at your disposal to allow you to not go crazy?
I don't know if I did not go crazy.
Or at least go crazy, but still, keep going,
Yeah.
keep going and
Keep
stay,
going through the...
yeah, I mean, stay afloat.
Yeah, for sure. Well, there's probably two things that were on my side. One, I didn't have a family yet. Obviously, when I say that, I mean a partner and children, right? I didn't have a partner. I was at a point where I'd ended one relationship and it was kind of nice. I was really in a good space and I had time. I had time to sleep on floors on an airbed whilst I was decorating the first unit and I was furnishing it with no prior knowledge or spreadsheet of products or just what am I doing. Whilst trying to hustle in the day, I would then furnish it in the evening. But like I said, my implementation's not very efficient. So I would end up, not really doing anything efficiently, but I was doing it. And that was me on that, very first side. I was a hustler, not a strategic person. But what did I have? I had time. Some people might be starting without time. You got 4 kids, 5 kids, and I now know your pain because, I met Emma. Emma had a daughter. She was 7 at the time. She's now 12 and a bit. And we've had a baby boy who's nearly 1 year old. So there's a bit more life or family time, or a lot more in my life now. There's certainly a lot more chaos. So what are the two things? Well, if time is number one, I'd say support and a support network is number 2. I've actually spent about, and I know a lot of people say this, and I don't know how true it is, but I genuinely know because obviously it's my money. But I've spent about £80,000 on communities and property education, support networks, which are all business related. But actually, if I think back, kind of like therapy. A lot of it is coaching. So my coach was about £40,000 for the year. I learned so much. And I genuinely think the effect it had on me, even to today, with how I handle the chaos, is massive. What I learned is I I always remember the saying that I did learn on one of my coaching calls, which when you're the leader, it's not what you're doing, it's who you're being. It's not what you're doing, it's who you're being. Because there's a team there now, and I've got to lead that team. And if I'm in stress or chaos, or I'm unhappy, or I'm grumpy or miserable, whatever, I remember that and think, I can't turn up to a call like this. I can't turn up in front of my team like this. So I get myself in a good state, and it's who I'm being. And you soon enough realize that you've got to be genuine with it, because otherwise they'll figure you out, and they won't be led by, they'll see you as a bit of a fraud. So time and a great network, whether it's a paid for network or a free network. Free, be careful, because you do get any Tom, Dick and Harry in these free networks at times. But a really, really good coach, dare I say therapist, on my side, in my corner. And I remember paying for that first big chunk. And I had maybe 6 properties at this time. So we were doing some cash flow, but I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew that I needed some assistance, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
But those 2 things have really, really helped me, Seb. So even now, people comment, how do you deal with all of this? And I'm just like, yeah, good question. I don't get too caught up about it. I try and stay really linear. I try and stay calm. And I guess I always look at people in way bigger positions than me and go, well, they're managing okay. So there's got to be a way for more. And I think the answer is delegation, team, a good coach, good systems, all that stuff. It just layers on, and it helps.
Was there ever a moment though where, you went through something so difficult that it made you question whether you even wanted to continue and whether you were on the right path?
Yeah, more so. So the birth of my son massively made me say, okay, I'm not working late anymore. I'm not doing it. But I've kind of had maybe 4 or 5 years. Yeah, what it would have been 5 years, right? Under my belt, in the bag, almost 6 years. I'll lose track of time. But I had that in the bag. So I built the team, built the systems. It's not perfect, but I'm not going to work late anymore. That's one thing I said. I'm not going to do every Saturday and Sunday anymore. I would have thought nothing of doing till 11 p.m. 6 days a week, and then something on the 7th day. Just like I've just got to work for a little bit. I'd have thought nothing of doing that. Now I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. In fact, now I have every Thursday off, which is a blessing, on most Fridays. So it's really cool. But in terms of, has there ever been a point where I want to throw the towel in? There's been moments where I get frustrated that it's not what I want. What I mean by that is I can see one thing and what I've got is a different thing. It's usually, right now, I'll be totally honest, where we're going through a phase of, we've kind of stumbled upon clients and owners, property owners, over the course of the years. I've been mainly focused on my properties in the early days, and then we've taken on clients, and we do everything to keep their properties absolutely tip-top and booked up and all of that. But I've put no effort in. So how do we get new clients? How do we get new leads? How do we look from an outside point of view? And, I get frustrated at things like that when I realize it and the penny drops. But at no point, I don't think I've ever wanted to throw the towel in.
Yeah, perhaps because you had that support group, you had that, you had that person you could go and talk with, and also that mindset, right, of like putting things into perspective and being like, well, if this other people can do it and they have way more things on their shoulders, right? It's like we were talking about, entrepreneur books before, coming into this call, and it's like, I mean, if these people can figure it out, why couldn't we, right? And maybe we're delusional for thinking like that, but at the same time, there's a reason why, you're an entrepreneur, right? You got to be optimistic, and especially at first, the chances are not in your favor, but you still see, your vision very clearly, very optimistically. So it does take a certain personality. Is there such a thing, do you believe, as someone that should not pursue entrepreneurship, as you coach different people, younger generations, whatnot, people come with, advice your way, would you say there's people that shouldn't even bother because it's just not part of their personality? And if so, like what would you say would the personality look like for an ideal entrepreneur?
Mm. I'd hate to say don't even bother. I'd hate to say that because as an entrepreneur, we want the best for everyone and everything, right? We see the vision. Oh my God, you could do this. You could do this. But it's definitely not for everyone. I think we've all, well, if you listen to entrepreneur podcasts, and by the way, one thing I wanted to mention, which I forgot, I had a paid network as my support, but it all started with podcasts of free material. Tony Robbins. I was obsessed with Tony Robbins and David Goggins. I was obsessed with Grant Cardone and all of these big American names of self-development. So if you're thinking, geez, I only got £40,000 to pay a coach, you don't have to. But go all in on this material. Go all in. Gary Vaynerchuk, I remember listening to his first book, 2016, 2017. That's when my journey really started to shift. But back to this question of what is an entrepreneur. So I wouldn't want to say to anyone, don't bother. I might use it as a reverse psychology tactic. You know what? Don't bother. It's not for you. Just leave it. You cushy life. I might use it as a tactic, but I'd hate to say it. However, there's definitely a personality trait that works and definitely a personality trait that would struggle. And I think those that struggle, they're the guys that are the people that want certainty. They're the people that they want balance. You meet these people that are like, I just really like balance in my life. And I'm like, it's not for you. We all love balance, by the way, but to be an entrepreneur, I think we all know if you are an entrepreneur listening, it doesn't exist in the first 5, even 10 years. It just doesn't exist. Or if there's a new project on the scene, on the landscape, it doesn't exist. So certainty and balance, and if you genuinely don't have the work ethic, I don't think it's going to work. Maybe if you're starting with a huge lump of cash and you don't have a really strong work ethic, you could make some stuff work. But I don't think you would, because ultimately cash runs out and you have to have the work ethic to make sure the detail's right. That's probably the other thing as well. Are you detailed enough? Are you detailed enough with whatever it is you choose? Are you passionate? I don't know if it's passion or detail or if one of the two are the same thing, but do you care enough? That's ultimately what I'm trying to say. Of course, there's the flip side. If you don't care and you're not really that hardworking and you love certainty and you kind of like balance, it's not really in your favor right now. Again, the different coaching client earns a lot of money through his day job, right? And he earns well through his day job. And he has a day job where he's on for a period of months and then he's off for a period of months. And I see a real struggle because he's comfortable. He earns well and he gets 6 months of the year off and he's comfortable. So there has to be some form of, Tony Robbins would say, burn the boats, right? Cut all other options off. If you really want this, you would cut it all off. And that's what I did, because I was like, I'm kind of too cushy here. I was in an events management role, $5,000, $6,000 a month, and I was comfortable. I was like, that's more money than I've ever had. And I was just in it for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. I was like, oh my God, this year. Then 4 years came by, 5 years came by. I was like, enough. I've got to stop. If I'm this comfortable, I'm not going to do what I want to do. So I just stopped. But yeah, I think those are the key things. I don't know if you could pick out or where I would go. It's not really in your favor. And of course, the opposite of those things, it is in your favor.
Makes sense. And there's something I want to touch on. You said, you mentioned a few traits there, which all make sense. There's something you said too, which is, do you care enough, but also are you attentive enough to the details to follow through with things? Now, there's something interesting about this point, which is you mentioned earlier, you're someone that's someone that's going to set it well and forget it type person, delegate it, set the systems, let the machine run. As someone that's a visionary that has learned that the best use of your time or where your gifts lies not necessarily in the implementation of the minutia of the detail of the day to day. How do you manage to still do that of delegating while still, not going to the extreme of you're delegating so much that, things are being stolen, or, people are not working enough, or, like there needs to be some element of checks and balances. But as someone that's naturally more of a visionary, you don't want to be doing those checks and balances necessarily, or at least it doesn't come natural, right? It comes natural to look forward, where are we going, let's put the people in place and let's let them do their job. Has it ever happened that sort of has led to, less than optimal outcomes because you've delegated too much, you've like trusted too much, you've like not had enough checks and balances, and if so, how do you approach it today?
Love that. It absolutely has, for sure. Where it's led to less optimal outcomes or results or whatever. So let me try to break this down. I think there's one thing I learned from it, and I actually joined a different coaching group, and through this new coaching group that I took part in for 6 months there, like a 6-month package. I took part in it, and they really taught me something that answered exactly the point. So I was suffering at times with, how do I know, like, I'm getting the results? Other than going in and doing what I would say like a parachute deep dive. I'd parachute into a department now and again. I'd want to know everything. I'd almost audit my own company. So how do I know I was thinking like a monthly basis, but I've actually do it on a daily basis now. And the thing I learned, and it's very powerful, it's very easy to implement, is find your critical number for that department. So find your critical number for that department and have it reported into you as often as you need it. So I think in most instances, you could do weekly, you could do bi-weekly, you could do monthly, or you could even do it daily. So what is a critical number? Well, a critical number is the absolute most important number to make you be able to say the business is going in the right direction or not.
Mm.
So in short-term rentals, in hospitality, in service accommodation, Airbnb, all of those things, what is the critical number? And I had a hard time trying to figure this out. What's our critical number? Now, our critical number, we could be 100% occupied, but we could have sold the rooms 50% too cheap. And therefore, occupancy can't be our critical number. So is it gross margin? Is it gross profit? Is it, what do we focus on? So every single day, we actually track our gross revenue. Every day, we do a whole portfolio of gross revenue. And yes, we can break it down if we need to. But I know from, let's say, my sort of marketing sales team, what's our gross revenue? Well, it just gets pasted in a WhatsApp group, so I can see it every single morning. And I know where we're at straight away. And then over on the hospitality side of the team, the guys who deal with guests, the guys who deal with reviews and things like that, we have a critical number of what's our total average review score on each platform for this week. What have we been reviewed at? Because if I see this dipping, I can parachute in. If I see it going up, I'm comfortable. I'm like, okay, this is good. We have an operations team. Our operations team, they're kind of linked in with reviews, so they take care of all the maintenance, all that we've implemented, like not just housekeepers, of course, but spot checkers as well. So they look after all the moving parts there. They're also linked into both the reviews, but we also track the number of spot checks, like the quantity of spot checks, and how many issues have been brought up. So how many live issues have we got? Oh, we've got 52 live issues. Geez, what's going on? Let me parachute in. Let me take a look. We've only got 2 live issues. Okay, we got it under control? Yeah. Okay, good. So each department has a critical number. I mean, I've got a board here in my office now. Steph helped me draw this up where we're tracking data on a weekly and daily basis. So it's actually physical. His digital is one thing. When you see it and you stare at it, you're like, okay, I can now see all these numbers and data. That's kind of where I wanted to get to, and I think it's a good point for everyone to get to. If you can track one number per department, or even better, one number per company. Oh my God. You will be able to say, yeah, we're doing well, or no, we're not doing well. So
The North Star metric, right? That they refer to as well. That's and it's important to think about getting it right, right? Because you could end up measuring something that, to your point about occupancy rate. I hear this all the time. People are like, "Oh, I'm 90% occupied." It's like, well, good for
yeah,
you, but like you could be giving away the property for free. I mean, and be 100% occupied. So that doesn't show the full picture. So yeah, no, very very interesting perspective. I want to touch on the investment side of things. So you're going through a project right now of investing in a boutique hotel. What have you learned in that process, and how is buying a boutique hotel different from buying a normal, residential property?
yeah, thank you. Yeah, we are doing it very early doors, just to full transparency, very early doors. It's been a project that we've been working on for maybe a year, but only a couple of hours a week in the early days. As we learn to, run numbers and really understand the model and really understand the challenges from an investment side, from like, cash, lending, dealing with all of that, and also the end result. What are we turning this thing into? So it's something I'm really enjoying. It plays into my architectural side a lot, the visionary side a lot, and of course the hospitality side. And the principle behind all of this is, instead of having multiple units across, different parts of the UK, let's have multiple units in one building. Let's do a hotel, but offer what people want nowadays, which is a hotel with a kitchen and multiple rooms. So I often call it's kind of a Las Vegas model. If you go to Las Vegas and you stay in, I think I stayed in the Venetian, and I had a suite with like 2 bedrooms and a kitchen. I'm like, what is this place? Well, we don't have that really in the UK, but that's something I'm really passionate about. In other words, families can book, stay in one room, have that experience of a holiday let, of an Airbnb. But for us, it's multiple units in one. From an investment side of things, we're always looking for investors to work with. So people that have either got the experience of doing this, or they're sat on a lot of cash that they don't know what to do with. And we're kind of doing it on an equity share. So it's me, my business partner, and then the third member will be the financer. And yeah, we're at a position where we're pretty much there on a deal, on our first deal. We've got a hotel, which I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it's got about 15 rooms in. But more importantly, it's got 2 acres of land, and it's got a great scenic environment, mountains, lakes, forests, all of that. So we're going to hopefully build out on that 2 acres of land with glamping pods, a different experience level. Sorry, my phone went. A different experience level of what we're able to offer right now. That's where I envisage PureStay being right in the beginning. Is almost like an Instagrammable experience where I would book, or I could buy my friends, my family a weekend, and I know they're going to have an awesome time. I just know they're going to have an awesome time. So for me, that's the driving force behind it. But from a finance and investment point of view, it consolidates a lot of things. It's not properties scattered around. It's actually a solid investment in one place. From an operational and hospitality point of view, I think there's a great market for it. And again, operationally, it's in one place. We could hire one hotel manager, one maintenance person, one housekeeper, or at least one head housekeeper, instead of having to deal with, 20 different ones. I'm dealing with one on one side. But yeah, it's challenging in one aspect, and it's kind of taking me back to being in architecture in another aspect, because I'm looking at a site that's kind of crusty and old right now, and I've got a vision of what it needs to be, and that equates to a certain amount of money, and then how we want to run it at the end. We've done all those figures, and you kind of then just end up in spreadsheets, and it's like, okay, we need this, it will churn out this, and here's the time span that we expect. Here's our offer, then we'd negotiate in that. So yeah, I think I'm going to enjoy it a lot. Like I said to you the other day, it may be this deal, it may not, because you never know in property and investment. Some deals just get pulled at the last second. But either way, I think we're going to take PureStay into that direction, which is experiential stays. Something I'm super excited about.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. And just out of curiosity, the financing side of things, not sure how far in the process you are as far as that goes, but is it very different from, let's say, if you wanted to get a loan from a bank to buy a cottage? Are you looking at very different, you know, loan to values, or I don't know what the term is in the UK, but you know what percentage they're gonna, you know, finance you and whatnot. Because I can speak about, you know, my experience kind of looking into this out of curiosity here in Canada. The loan to values are very low. In other words, like the banks won't lend you enough because of the risk that they perceive, you know, in the volatility of a hotel. And you know, not only that, but it's based on the revenues too, and sometimes if you're buying it, maybe the revenues are not optimized, so you end up having to put a lot of down payment in, you know. But when I looked into this, at least here was like something like 50% of the price is what you had to put in because of the risks that they perceived in the asset class. And then if you on top of that 50% have to put in money for renovations and, you know, making the design properly, and the you know, the you know, the amenities, and you know, the furniture, you end up, you know, having to look at a project where you have to rely on a lot of equity partners, or you know, a few that have a lengthy pocket. So have you looked into that side, like the financing? Is it something you're going to be able to use financial institutions for, or is it something where you really got to go more on the equity side of things for the majority of the financing?
Yeah, I think the first thing to say is very similar. What everything you've just described, Canada, UK, this is very similar. I've had a lot of conversations around that and the risk. Our plan is to try, and we've got quite a lot of interest, but try and finance this thing privately.
Mm,
Uh, you already said it, you know, a couple, if like maximum. I'd really like to work with one big equity partner. Deep pockets, long pockets, yeah, wide pockets, you name it. They've got the capital, but to them,
green
I don't know.
pockets.
Yeah, evergreen. Like it's, and these guys do exist. There's people out there all day long that, you know, they don't know how to do the bit that we know how to do. They
Yeah.
want to be involved because the cash flow is so healthy at the other side. But in terms of banks, yeah, I mean, we've got open conversations with brokers more than banks. They then talk to the banks. I always go on the idea that, look, we privately finance for the first year, first 2 years, we get some stronger books, we show the model working, and then we're going to go and leverage the banks at maybe 70% maximum. I don't ever think you
Okay.
need 70% LTV. So let's say 70-30, providing everything's well oiled, it's working, it's looking great. You know, there might be a broker listening to this going, no, I could get you that. I could get you better than that. Well, get in touch with me if you can, and get in touch with you, Seb. But it's tough. In the banks are super risk averse around hotels and hospitality. There's a lot of hotels closing. There's a lot of pubs closing. There's a lot of, you know, venues closing. I get it. But we know, those in hospitality, we know why. It's because it's evolved, right? It's evolved to that multi-room stay that has lounge and kitchen. It's kind of Airbnb. I've still got a live advert here in the UK at the minute where they basically are pushing, don't stay in a hotel, stay in an Airbnb. Why? Because it's got multiple rooms, it's got a kitchen, it's got a garden, you can all be together. And that is the
Mhm.
philosophy of people wanting to go away. So yeah, I think from a finance point of view, we've offered equity out. There's been a strong interest. There's actually less interest without equity, as you can imagine. We buy the site outright. We do the renovation work, perhaps outright, perhaps with some development finance. We get the GDV to where we want it to be. We operate, and then we refinance and pull some cash. Whether we go again, I can't answer because we're still at the first one. But if you know, if it goes well and we love it, and we're not stressed to the eyeballs, and everything I've said on this call has gone to mush.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Still fighting. We'll do it again, but I'm not sure at this stage. But yeah, that's the plan.
Love it. Love it. No, and we'll have to do a second episode a couple months later, a couple years later, just to see the full cycle of that project. I'm very curious, very intrigued. And yeah, looking forward to seeing that, once it's live, once it's, ready to go. Hey, JP, just to, wrap this one up, because I could keep you here for 2 more hours, 3 more hours. And believe me, we would have things to talk about for 3 more hours. Just kind of like wrapping it up and summarizing, the lessons and the learnings. So the 80,000 pounds that you've invested in your, self-education, that's massive. And so if you were to kind of like summarize for the audience the key lessons from those investments in your personal developments, like the things that you believe have impacted you the most when you look back, because there's always courses and programs that work better than others. There's also sometimes things that you learn today that you actually find out is helpful years down the line. When you look back at it all as an aggregate, what would you say are the main lessons from all those investments in your own personal education and coaching and mentorship and whatnot?
Love that. Yeah, when you say £8,000 out loud, it's a lot of money, right? But it really is worth it. The main lesson, I think, is the development of me as a person. I was a very independent, I can do this myself person. I didn't ask for help. I certainly didn't pay people to set me up businesses because they were better at it than I was. I would pick up a paintbrush and do it myself, which now is wild. It taught me the coaching, especially. We did a lot of processing. We did a lot of going back to childhood, this kind of element. Like I said earlier, is a bit like therapy. There was a huge personal element, and that personal element freed my mind up, freed me up. I got out of my own way. I learned to delegate, but I learned to build and scale. I learned to not sweat the small stuff, or when to sweat the small stuff. And personally, I learned that, whatever you're carrying with you right now, you don't have to carry it forward from this moment. If you tackle it right now, you don't have to carry it forward, even though you might have carried it for 35 years. I think that's probably, it's hard to quantify how powerful that stuff is. Getting out of your own way. So powerful. The technical stuff is what I also learned. Like second is you learn a lot of technical knowledge. You learn a lot of industry knowledge. You learn a lot of business knowledge. How to run a business and how to manage a business is probably the biggest thing when it comes to technical stuff. If I could give a message to anyone, it's there's no magic wand, but consistency and doing small things daily, whether it's that critical number. That's a huge thing. People know, oh yeah, okay, what's my critical number? But they might not then do it. Well, you've got to do the action. You've got to do whatever it is. It's not magic. It's just, you've got to follow through, and you've got to implement day after day after day, or if it's a weekly thing, week after week, whatever. So for me, out of every system I've learned, how to manage teams, how to stay financially viable, how to deal with all of that, it's just doing the daily actions consistently. At my scale, we're not huge, but we do have a team of around 10 people, including me. And then we've got around 25, 30 housekeepers around the country. They're sort of contractors. So there's a lot of people involved. There's maintenance guys. Then we've got PureStay housekeeping. We've got that team. There's a lot of moving parts. So what is the daily routine? And I think to finish, we set our days out very, very strategically. So me and my whole team, we work on money in tasks first. Where's the money in task? Where do we get money in? Once we've delivered that, we work on escalations. Is there anything there threatening the business? Now, only if something is urgent does it trump the whole lot. It goes to the top of the pile if it's urgent. So we do money in, then we do escalations, i.e., is there something that's causing me a problem that I need to fix? And then we do project work. And project work is, say, the afternoon of our day. The new project, or I was working on pulling all these figures together. It's going to take me a few days. That's the project work. I was working on, for me, right now, it's buying the hotel. That's project work. That's new things. But in the morning, if I've got money in tasks, if I've got to make a call to someone who's got 10 properties and wants to bring them over to PureStay, then that's first. So it's like basic daily actions. I mean, there's lots of them, but if I was to really simplify it, I'd say that's something you probably implement straight away.
Is that the case? Like with your operational team, you also have this mindset of money in tasks first, even with the operations team.
Yeah, so everybody's money in might be slightly different. So it's easy to talk about sales, but in terms of operations, let's say, let me give you a bit more of a detailed one. Let's say we know there's a problem in a property, but we've got 10 people checking in at 3 p.m. today. Well, if we don't fix that problem, that's going to be a money out problem. It's going to be a refund or a compensation or a cancel booking. That's like a money in problem. So how do we get the money in that respect? We fix the problem. So that operations often does slide into escalations as well. But if you're handling it, how does the business earn money? Okay, the business earn money by X, Y, Z. Okay, is there anything stopping that, or is there anything bothering that, or is there anything in the way of that, or is it could be me. I'm in the way because I'm not picking up the phone. Okay, so do it. I'm in the way because I'm not fixing the shower, and if someone checks in, it's going to be a complaint. Okay, so do it.
Because you're in this hour-long podcast that's not letting you, get going to get started with some calls this afternoon. No, just joking here. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense, JP. That makes a lot of sense. Hey, listen, this has been great. I've been, taking some good notes. I hope the audience has as well. It was great to have you on. Where can people connect? Where can people follow along?
Yeah, just get on my Instagram. So my full. I mean, I seem like I've got a lot.
We'll put it on the comments too, so people can take a look at it. But
yeah, I mean, you could either follow PureStay.co.uk, but JP_property coach. JP_property coach. That's my personal Instagram. So you see a little bit of personal, a little bit of business, but yeah, that's probably the easiest bit to get in touch. Yeah, please.
Perfect, JP. Please. It was great to have you on. I really, really appreciate you taking the time, and it was very insightful. And again, people listening, take one idea, implement it. If you've done that, then we were successful here. It comes down to putting things in action, right? Because otherwise we can come up with many ideas and then we don't do anything with it. It's not worth anything at that point. But I think there's a lot of practical ideas here. Just take one, put it in practice, and then we succeeded here. Thank you so much for your time, JP. It was great to have you on.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you for your time as well. I appreciate being on. So yeah.